you warm enough, madam? Because some of these windows you've opened up and I honestly don't think there's any heat for them to be stuck with you. Yeah, no, you're only locking it like that. You're only locking it like that. That's better. Thing at the moment that's called a computer. Now, the days before they didn't have the computer, it took one man from the black and white hut above me here to operate all of the caissons on his own until 1983. One man, that's all it basically took. Now we have a computer and we've moved everything into the main building over here. We've advanced. Instead of having one man, we now have four. Mr. Cameron is extremely pleased because we've increased the workforce. Right, now you're on a thing that's called the Anderton boat lift. Why is it here and what's the reason for it? Well, we have to go back to 1875 again. Why 1875? Well, in those days, an engineer by the name of Mr. Edwin Clark, he wanted a link from the Trent and Mersey Canal at the top here to the Weaver Navigation astern of you. 1875. Why did he want the link for? He wanted it for the salt trade, for the coal trade, and the ceramic trade from the Midlands. Now, his original idea at first, he was not going to build this. He was going to build a set of 5 locks that you see in the centre of Manchester, etc., etc. And then he realised, if he had built a set of 5 locks here in 1875, with all the traffic that would have to come down in those days, the Trent and Mersey Canal at the top here would eventually run out of water. So the 5 locks were definitely out. So he decided on this, the first hydraulic lift in the world for boats. Now there's 9 of them now all throughout the globe, but we were the very first. But we also have another one here in the United Kingdom. You've got the book. It's called the Falkirk Wheel in Scotland. Now that's slightly different than what I do. Where I go up and down, the Falkirk Wheel has to revolve. That's the Falkirk Wheel, which is only 12 years old. Right, now in 1875, things were not the same then as they are today. Why is that? Well, in 1875, they never had these 5 sets of A-frames that you see on either side of the lift. Neither did they have the machinery deck above you. All the lift comprised of was the basic structure and the 2 caissons, of which you're in one of them. Now, underneath the caissons in 1875, they had 2 hydraulic rams, similar to that one over here. Except in those days, all the rams were made of solid iron, and they were made in Germany. And you had all the Victorians used for steam and water hydraulics to operate the rams. Okay, that worked fine for quite a few years, but unfortunately they had to take the water from the Weaver Navigation here, which in this small area all around here was over 25% salt. So what happens over the years when you combine iron and salt together? Loads of corrosion and loads of rust. So by 1908, I'm afraid we have to move forward a few years now, I'm afraid they were having an awful problem with the corrosion on the hydraulic rams. They were having a real problem here. But who arrived at the scene in those days to solve all their problems? Was a Colonel John Sainer. Now he left the Cheshire Regiment and he came here to Anderton as an advisor and engineer. And he told the trustees that he could solve all their problems and make this lift far more efficient. And everybody said, how? And his reply was, I'm going to turn it into a thing called the electric lift, which he then proceeded to do. Alright, now the first thing he had to do here at Anderton was to get rid of the 2 hydraulic rams that were made of solid iron. He got them out of the way. Then he built 5 sets of A-frames on either side of the lift here. Then he installed the machinery deck above you with all the cogs, the wheels, and the motors powered by electricity. Then he had hanging down this side, I'll show you when we get up top, 252 tons of counterweights. Hung up by wires, they were going over the top through the gearing and hanging down this side where he had another 252 tons. That's the magic word we use, 252. Do I have any Army, Navy, Air Force and Marines amongst us? Obviously not, okay, we won't tell you what a 252 is. How did it work? It was simple. When the caisson arrived at the top, they added extra water to it. Alright, so this increased the weight and started to send it down. With the help of the electric motors and the counterweights, sent the caisson down, and at the same time up came the other one, similar to a massive pair of scales. And that worked fine all the way through until 1983. 1983 arrived. And the engineers here at the time were getting very concerned about all the corrosion that was appearing around the lift. So they did all the x-raying to it, And they came to the conclusion they had to shut it down, it wasn't safe. And that was the end of the first hydraulic boat lift in the world, shut forever. Now if you were here in the 80s and in the 90s, all that machinery deck above you was lying neatly stacked up in a field over here on your right hand side, because that's all it was in those days. That was just an ordinary field. Overgrown with weeds, the superstructure was rusting away, and the caissons were full of rubbish. Bye bye Anderton boat lift. That was not the case. As soon as the lift had closed down, a few groups of people from here, friends of the Anderton lift and friends of the Trent and Mersey Canal, all joined together, and they collected thousands of signatures from people from all over the United Kingdom to open the lift again purely for the holiday traffic. All the commercial traffic had gone. Then they got in touch with their local Member of Parliament from this area, who became slightly famous, if you want to put it in that sort of phrase, under the premiership of then Mr. John Major, and his name was Neil Hamilton. He went down to number 10 with a few people from here, and they met the Prime Minister at that particular time, that was Mrs. Thatcher. Right, they showed her all the signatures, all the petitions, etc. She was interested, and over the years she spoke to English Heritage. English Heritage then spoke to British Waterways, which is not in existence anymore, it's gone, and they decided to open the lift purely for the holiday traffic. So in came in all the subscriptions, all the donations, etc. But the main funding came from the lottery fund, 3.3 million. The whole of the restoration has cost just short of £7.5 million. And we're back in operation from March 2002. Although we had the official opening done the following year with a very famous man who was reading the weather forecast a few weekends ago on television, who got awfully soaked on the River Thames during the Jubilee weekend. And also, I believe he grows his own vegetables, who came striding up this aisle here to fill the whole boat with his entourage. And that, of course, was His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. Not Mr. Cliff Richard, as somebody said yesterday, trying to be funny. Imagine that. OK, now we're back. Now we've gone back to the hydraulic system. We can't use the counterweights anymore because the structure won't stand it. So we've had two hydraulic rams made in the same foundry in Germany as our original rams. Only this time our rams are stainless steel. And they cost £1 million each, and they have a working life for some unknown reason of 99 years. And we're using hydraulics and electricity to operate the lift under the computer. Right, the computer's clicked in. I'm going up at 9 feet per minute. We also have the other caisson on its way down at 9 feet per minute. And it's all being done by these black shiny hydraulic rams that cost £1 million each. Now if we took the ram out of the shaft, it's 60 feet long. But we only use 48 feet of it. It has a diameter of 36 inches and it weighs 38 tons. Now here's the other caisson on its way down. All these caissons that you see are the originals from 1875. These are the original caissons from that era. Right, they might have new plates here and there. Nearly all the rivets have been replaced, but these are the original caissons from 1875. You see the effects of the pitting on some of them. And we've got a boat in it. Very unusual this time of the morning. There we go. We have one boat in it. Now all of these caissons were designed to take two narrow boats, 72 feet long, obviously side by side. Nowadays it's a mixture of everything. We can take a 72-footer, 50-footer, etc. And if we have any cabin cruisers that we generally do every day here, if there's room we can fit them in as well. So it's a mixture of everything nowadays. Right, how much does it cost to use the lift? Well, if you have a narrow boat, you have a cabin cruiser, or you have a canoe. It's entirely free. If, and the if bit is, as long as you have a canal. Now we have another canal down in that direction, which is called the Bridgewater, that heads into Manchester, and that does not come under this scheme. So they have to pay. So how much do they pay? Well, if they go up the lift or down, they pay £15. Make the return trip, they then pay another £15, £30 in all. But 99.999% of the boats that use this lift do have the license. Now you see that massive machinery up there. Now we have over 400 tons up there, and it does precisely nothing. It's only to show you what the lift was like until 1983. It doesn't do a thing. But the gearing on the wheels, if you can see them through the windows here, instead of being straight gearing, is in the form of an inverted V, which is called helical gearing, which is slightly unusual for here. And that was designed by a very, very well-known gentleman from France. I saw him this morning, I'll see him tonight. You're falling over him in Nottingham. You can't move around Nottingham without seeing him. Same as wherever you come from the Midlands. You see him every day. You see him all over the UK, all over Europe, and nearly all over the world, except obscure places like South Korea and a few others. And his name was Andre Citroën. After he did this, he went to build cars. So if you've got a Citroën that's got the double B on the bonnet or the hood, it's from here. Isn't that interesting? Now I said I had a magic number, didn't I? 252. Right, why is that? Now whether I have one person on board, 4 people, 24, 34, or my full complement of 56, all the people on board the vessel, also the vessel itself, and the water in the caisson, and the caisson itself weighs exactly 252 tons. It doesn't matter how many people you have on board or how many boats are in the caisson, we still weigh the same. And I know you all know the answer, but you've all forgotten it. It's called Archimedes' principle. Somebody was playing the railway before. Right, now all the commercial traffic has gone from here now, but in the days of the commercial traffic they had to pay. But the charges were exceedingly simple. This happens every damn morning lately. If a narrowboat entered the caisson, say with any cargo at the bottom or from the top, if it had any cargo on board, they had to pay, and they had to pay 1 shilling of the old money for a loaded boat, 5 pence. If it hadn't got any cargo on board, they had to pay more, and they had to pay 2 shillings and 6pence of the old money for an empty boat, 12.5 pence. I know it sounds the wrong way around, but it's correct. And they also had to pay on the tonnage, and that was 1 penny per ton. So if a narrowboat entered the caisson from the top carrying 20 tons of salt, for example, they'd pay the old shilling and 20 of the old pence. And many years ago there used to be a footbridge across here where they had to employ a clerk, and he'd go from left to right, right to left, left to right every day. He'd collect the tolls, which he'd place in the toll huts, which are on either side of the lift here, until he got utterly bored, completely demoralised, and moved to Nottingham because they didn't have a boat lift there. Right, now we've come up 50 feet and 4. From the top of the machinery deck all the way down to the ground is 80 feet. Now what's happening here now is simple. All you people are on board a vessel, and the vessel is in a tank. And the tank's got a gate at one end, and I've got a gate at this end. We've also got the inner gate of the aqueduct. Now, all these gates you see here, at Anderton, by the way, are not from 1875. All the gates were replaced in the 20s and 30s. There's no original gate. Each gate weighs approximately 2.5 tons. Now here's what's happening. Here is the inner gate of the aqueduct, which is stationary. Now here's my gate. I've come up 50 feet and 4 inches. And I have formed, it's a watertight seal in the form of a V. I've come up like that. How do we make it watertight? One of the gates has got a strip of rubber across it, and the other gate has got a strip of wood. That forms the watertight seal at the base of the V. Now this is the computer doing it. Now on my gate here I have a thing called a latch, which the computer has moved across and attached itself onto the outer gate of the aqueduct. So we've joined the 2 gates together, and we're going to lift them up at the same time. So we're going to lift a total weight of 5 ton. Now in this empty space in between the 2 gates in the form of a V, it's empty. So we can't attempt to raise the gates up at the moment. Why? We've only got the pressure of the water here in the caisson and the pressure of the water in the aqueduct. What will happen next is simple. We'll get the computer to fill the space in between the 2 gates with water from the aqueduct. Once the computer's filled the space with water, we'll get the computer to raise the gates 18 inches. Why does it do that? It checks the levels either side. Now every night during the whole of this year I have gone home and prayed that we have a summer like we had in 1976. Why? Because I was away for 9 months and missed everything. If we had a summer like we had in 1976, we wouldn't be able to operate the lift because the river would fall so dramatically. The same as a fortnight ago, we couldn't operate the lift for 4 hours. Why? Because we had so much rain here that the river rose and we couldn't sluice it off in time. You understand what I'm saying about, because we have a level to work it. So up goes the gate heat exactly 18 inches. Then it hands over to the operator at the top here. Now he has a control panel behind this pillar here. He presses his buttons and up come the two gates. It's as simple as that. But unfortunately we still cannot sail out. Why not? We've employed a safety system here on every single gate you see that Anderton has never had before, but Anderton has never had an accident. And the safety system is called hydraulic shock bolts. Once the gates go up, we then get the computer to bang in the bolts to hold the gates up at the top, okay? Bang in go the bolts. Now, very occasionally, and I do stress occasionally, we sometimes find that these bolts won't go in. So we do not proceed through the gate. Why not? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? If I'm halfway through and the wire snaps, I'm unfortunately halfway through, half of us will be in the aqueduct and the rest of them will still be here in the caisson. So we go all the way down below, swing round in the basin and enter the other caisson. Now on a busy summer's day here, that can take over 1 hour, during which time half of them have fallen asleep and the other half are bored to tears. So how do we get around that one? Unfortunately we can't anymore. Why? Because they took the video away from me a few months ago. What we used to do is roll the screen down and show you them the most exciting video on the boat lift that they've ever seen in their life. Nowadays we have to walk around with this and ask if we have a singer on board. Now halfway through the summer of last year, if you could call it a summer, I did, we got halfway up on a Sunday afternoon and something happened here at Anderton that never happened before. We had a power cut all over the area at 12:30 in the afternoon that affected everybody's Sunday lunch, affected our computers, everything. And we were halfway up and we had a full boat. Now we were stuck for 20 minutes. Now normally what they would do is they would lower me down manually. That would take another 20. They can't attempt to raise me, but they can lower me down. They were just about to lower me down when the power came back. So we were stuck for 20 minutes. But who did we have on board that afternoon? Don't say Cliff Richard. 27 members of the Manx Choir from Douglas. Absolutely fantastic. A great choir. Now ahead of us I've got this thing that's called the aqueduct. Why do we have an aqueduct here? Well, we have to go back to 1875 again. Why 1875? Well, in those days the river flew on its course down below, but in 1875 came right around the back here and underneath here. So over there on your right hand side in those days, that was an island. So Edwin Clark, who built this lift, he had to have a link from the Trent and Mersey Canal at the top here to where the boat lift is. Why? Well, the river went underneath here. So he built this thing called the aqueduct. It's 165 feet long and it's got a water depth of 5 feet 3 inches. And you're exactly 50 feet and 4 inches above the Weaver. We don't use the metric system here. I'm not in France, I'm not in Holland, I'm not on the continent. We use feet and inches. Now, why do we have the gates at the far end? What's the purpose of those gates? Well, Edwin Clark installed the lift in 1875. Then he had a premonition of a serious accident here. So he put the gates at the far end a few years later. What was his premonition? When all the commercial traffic was here, Anderton only worked from sunrise to sunset and everybody went home. They never did the full circle of 24 hours. And he was always concerned that after everybody had gone home at night, somebody would come steaming into this aqueduct with a fully loaded boat, hoping to get the first lift out in the morning, when they shouldn't have done. They should have waited over in the basin. Now this is impossible to do now, but in those days it was possible. What would happen if this gentleman came roaring through here at night with a fully loaded boat, salt, coal, etc.? A, he lost control of it. B, he hadn't got a clue what he was doing. And C, he was under the influence of alcohol. And he came through here at full ahead. He hit these gates here. Bang. Straight through the caisson and hit those gates at the far end. Bang. He would go 50 feet and 4 inches into the Weaver. Bow first. Well, they weren't concerned about him, couldn't give that. What they were more concerned about was having to lose all of the water from the Trent and Mersey Canal that goes as far as the city of Mr. Robin Hood, or nearly outside Shardlow, and now we've got a lock in between. All of the water from the Bridgewater that goes into Manchester comes slowing through here at over 40 miles an hour. What would we have on the banks of the Weaver here? We'd have a serious New Orleans situation. We'd flood the whole area. So that's why he installed those gates at the far end. Well, it's not working.
No, it's all right. I didn't want to flash on, but it went up, so.
And the computer's got a lock on it, which means to say I can't have these gates open in front of me and the gates at the far end at the same time. It's a safety device. What's going to happen, he's going to close the gate into the caisson, because you know we can't have the two gates open at the same time, it's impossible. And he's going to walk along and open the gate into the Trent and Mersey. Now if you care to look down here, over here on the left, you can see all of the original weights used to hang over the side of the lift. Right. We have over 500 tons down there, and we formed them into a maze, which we thought was a good idea until yesterday, and it wasn't. Now if you look behind the weights, you can see it's the last of the original wall from the very early 1800s. That's the only bit that's remaining, and that shows you how far the river came round in those days. That's the only bit that's left, actually. So, years ago, all this was an island, because the river came right round the back here as well. Right, now the operator's closing the gate. He's going to walk along and open the gate into the Trent and Mersey Canal here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the bridge hole, we're going to swing round in the canal, we're going to enter the bridge hole, and I'm going to tie up over here on the right hand side. Right, do I have any questions?
Does it leak much water?
No. Oh, a little bit, yes, yes. Occasionally they have to replace the rubber on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, about maybe probably once every few years, to be honest with you. Yeah. But we've solved all the problems here. Occasionally we get the odd hiccup now and again, but again, you know, she's 1875.
It's not bad, is it?
No. Now, after Mr. Clark had built this, he went to France and Belgium and designed quite a few lifts over there, twice the size of this. I believe there's one out of action in France somewhere. We don't know the reason why. We've got another one outside the city of Toronto. We've got the Falkirk Wheel in Scotland, and we have another one on the River Rhine. We've had a lot of trouble with this with the German people. We had all sorts of places. But they emailed me over a few days ago. We found out I can't even speak German. My French is absolutely excellent. My Spanish is excellent, but my German is such. Niederfino. I'm probably saying it wrong. Off the Rhine, somewhere on the canal. That's all I know. Right, here's the operator. Now what he's got to do, you see the freshwater mussels on the gate here? Yeah. You see, that shows you how clean the river is these days. There we go. Now there's one thing we have noticed this summer. This canal is not as busy as it was the previous year. It's been more or less dead all summer. Generally in August it's like the M25 here, you know, with boats coming up and down, but not this year at all.
Port and starboard.
Now this vessel here on the right, this is waiting to go down the lift. goes all the way up to your city. How far is Shardlow outside the city of Nottingham? Because I've never bothered to find out.
10 miles from the city.
Well, if we went down the other way, we'd join the Bridgewater that would take us into central Manchester.
Nice for the wind.
Now, the chap that brought the most public down here was a couple of years ago, and my gosh, did he bring them down. It was well publicised. His name was Mr. Fred Dibner. He came down here and everybody wanted his autograph a couple of years ago, and then about another few months later he died. We had another gentleman here with the BBC who told me he'd had to row across the Atlantic, been stranded on a desert island, and climbed this and climbed that, and I said, I've never done anything like that. But he'd never done what I'd done. He was a nice guy to meet, Mr. Ben Fogel.
Oh, yeah.
Then we had another gentleman from the Coast programme. His name was Mr. Nicholas Crane, and with the BBC. And my colleague said to him in a very nice tone of voice, he said, I love Julia Bradbury's programme, how is she? The reply was, I've never heard of her. Also had Mr. John Prescott on board a few years ago with his brother, who owned a narrowboat. Fred Dibner, he brought them down in their hundreds. Right, now that's the Anderton boat lift. Now, if you do have any questions that might suddenly occur to you as you're walking off, we've got loads of people inside there that should be able to answer them for you. If they can't answer them, I'm extremely fortunate this morning. I have a manager on duty here that's been here since 1875 and knows everything you need to know about the boat lift. Now, we sort of have an exhibition down below as well, if you haven't seen that yet in the video. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it, and at least it hasn't rained.
Fascinating.
Right, okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.